Perfect. Okay, well, first of all, as I was saying, thank you for the introduction to Jenny and for allowing me to stay here. As you may be aware, Spain is one of the most dignified countries in the world for these COVID infections, and I think that it deserves and it was the opportunity to put on the table which have been the causes and which have been the measures introduced by the government, and of course, which might be the future amendments that can be introduced for people living here in Spain, and with the particular impact on the wealth of the taxpayers and investors. So please go to the next slide, please. Okay, I would like to introduce the presentation, talking about the Spanish timeline, and as I say here in this presentation, which is the timeline of the infection here in Spain. Everything started in the mid-January or mainly in February, when we have the first cases, the first infections in some islands here, curiously here in Spain, Canary Islands. There were people coming from, I can remember, from Netherlands, and well, then the infection got spread into Spain due to several demonstrations and sport events, like for example football games and things where people got infected. And after that, there was no measure or no amendment made by the government until the 14th of March, when the state of alarm was declared. And the thing is that from the first months of the year until that declaration of the state of alarm, there was no official measure introduced, no lockdown, no provisions provided to the citizens. And we had the example of Italy really close to here in order to look. But the real thing is that the country, the government here, did nothing in this regard. So we had a real impact here on the 14th of March. We had the declaration of a state of alarm, and of course the lockdown, which was introduced. And the impression or the strong powerful of this state of alarm was lately introduced by the halting of every activity here in Spain, every commercial activity, every bars, the pubs, the discos, everything, restaurants, everything was closed until this 13th of April, when there was some lifts of some restrictions, some restraints, particularly dedicated to children who were surviving at home during almost 2 months. And then recently, last weekend, to be honest, there was a harder or a new lifting of other restraints, which affected all the rest of individuals here in Spain. And at the end of this period, we've been able to get to the streets, and in a limited timeline too. So the thing and the question is, and now what is the future? What can we do now as per this timeline here? First thing, the first step is as of the 4th of May, we've been coming back to the normality, okay? So this is the kickoff of the back to normality process, as I said in the step 0. This process of back into normality is divided into 5 steps, and we are now in the first stage of this, which is step 0. Next step will be the step 1, and would imply the opening of some shops, some hairdressers, this kind of services which can be understood as being essential for the citizens, but on a limited basis. And after that, and if everything goes fine, and this checking is going to be made on a territory by territory basis. So it depends on the particular circumstances of each of the territories, and there could be different measures introduced in each of the territories. If everything goes well by the 25th of May, we can then go to some restaurants or to have a pint on a pub, but of course only with 30% of our friends, because there is a limit, a restriction for the bars and restaurants to open the tables of the restaurants with a limitation of the 30% of the total population of the restaurant or the bar. So we are going to be reintroducing in a normalized normality, okay? Then in June, by the 11th of June, and I hope everything can go well by that time. And then for the last stage of the process by the end of June, with a new normality, and we will see how this treat us, because of course we've been everyone in the country working from home, and we are looking forward to to this end of this process. Please go to the next steps. I would like to highlight two, which has been the social impact of this infection in Spain. I think that the figures are massive here, and there's a couple of reasons that I will explain in a couple of minutes too, that can justify these figures here. The number of cases here confirmed in our territory in Spain can represent, well, 220,000, okay? And then I think the most impressive figure is the number of deaths, because it can represent almost 10% of the total of the worldwide deaths in the whole world. So, which have been the reasons in order to reach this situation in our territory? Of course, these figures are backdated to the 1st of May, and well, these are the official figures provided by the Spanish government, but there are some gossips, and well, newspapers are telling that the official figures, of course, are not correct, because there are other people who have not been accounted as infected by the virus. But as I was saying, what have been the causes, or the causes that have caused this massive infection here in Spain and this situation? I think that the first of it would be the slow and late action from the central governments. Here in Spain, we have a central government and then different states who has their own competencies, and this distribution is mostly good for an administration of citizen rights and tax collections. But the thing is that when there is a huge event like this, that we've never faced something like this, it's difficult to coordinate all the different administrations, because they are from different parties and different ideas. So the curious thing is that in that situation, the central government did take action late, and they centralized the power in the central state, taking the power from the regions. So the real thing is that some regions started first to introduce their own regions in the fields they can do that. For example, taking the children from the school to houses, and suggesting, not obliging, but suggesting the people to work from home. And we had to wait until the 14th of March, as informed before, for the central government to have a real declaration of a state of alarm, to have a real action in that situation, okay? And the thing is that the state of alarm was declared for 15 days, and it has been, it's currently enforced here in Spain. It was extended for 15 days more, and then 15 days more, and now they're asking for some period more. Another cause of the social impact in Spain has been the healthcare services. Everyone here in Spain were sure that our public national health insurance or health services are really good, but the thing is that, there was a collapse in our services, because there was not enough beds for the infected people, and there was too a shortage in the medical supplies and devices. It was really, I was on to have a look at some pictures of the hospitals with the dead people in some rooms. It's disgusting. This shortage of supplies and equipment, of medical equipment, give the lead to a high rate of infection in the fields of doctors, nurses, and paramedics, which of course is not a good way to tackle the infection. And another important thing is that in Spain, there has been not a real politics of testing COVID-infected people. So this could be another reason to believe that the figures, of course, are not right, because they don't have the real instructions or the real perception of the real infected people here. On top of that, of course, there is another important thing in Spain, which is really serious, which is the economic and wealth impact that the COVID pandemic is causing here. There was a huge impact in the Spanish economy, a massive hit, of course, on the real economy, on the small shops, on small entrepreneurs, small business. And this would lead, in my opinion, a gross and an unemployment rate increase in the coming months. Please, next slide. So after analyzing these social impacts, which have been the social measures introduced in Spain by the administrations. The first of all was the declaration of the state of alarm on the 14th of March. And it was due, as I was saying before, to the uncontrolled spread of the virus. And it forced a national lockdown of everyone. And when I mean a lockdown, it's a real lockdown. We were not able even to go to the for a ride on a bike or for making some jogging. We were obliged to stay at home and to work from home. We were only allowed to go to the supermarkets or to the drugstore, or well, no more, or to the hospital in case you are infected. So there was a lockdown initially in business for a period of 15 days, but afterwards it was extended for a subsequent period of 15 days and an additional period of 15 days again. And there was an impressive measure introduced by the government that they were authorized by itself, by a public order, to take over of the private healthcare providers, the private hospitals. They've been used for managing the pandemic in all the way they can. And of course, there were other healthcare system measures like the construction of a special field hospital in IFEMA. IFEMA is a pavilion here, a huge pavilion here in Madrid where expositions are taken. It was constructed, it was built in 18 hours, so it's a record. And of course, it was used for placing the non-serious infected people, but it helped very much because all the hospitals here in Spain, particularly in Madrid, were really overcrowded. And on top of that, some hotels in Madrid were enabled in order to host some infected people, of course, to those who were less severe cases. There were additional social measures like the travel restrictions and military control of movements. We have militaries on the streets waiting for you to ask, where are you going, or what are you doing on the street if you have to be locked down in your house. There were, of course, another suspension or closure of all traffic operations and a restriction even of the free movement between some territories here in Spain. Talking about the administration activities, they were closed. All the administration here were closed, and well, of course, this includes the museums and any kind of public service was closed. And on top of that, after the first period of 15 days, there was a halting for all the non-essential activities. This means that everyone was at home working or not working. Next slide, please. One of the important things, besides to the social impact, of course, the financial impact here in Spain. Just a brief figures for your information. The EBIT 35, which is our stock market index, had several drops during March and April, but the hardest was the first on 9 March, when it dropped 7.96%, which was the fourth largest single day loss in its history. But well, the worst was on 12th of March when the drop was 14%. It was a really sad day here in Spain because it was a prelude of course, a forecast of the drop of the GDP and this kind of things, and of course, these are not good news for the Spanish economy. Which are real figures in our economy is that for the first quarter, our economy has fallen at 5.2%. This is the biggest drop in nearly a century in Spain. And these are real figures too. We have had a loss of 900,000 people losing their jobs here in Spain, just between these periods of the state of alarm, for the 15 first days of the state of alarm. So we will see how this treats the rest of people working here in Spain. But well, these are not a good sensation for the employment here in Spain. And the forecasts are not really good too for the future, because our bank, our internal bank, the Bank of Spain, give an estimation that our GDP could fall by anywhere between the 6.6 and 13.6 this year. Okay, it will be, of course, the biggest drop in nearly a century. And then the International Monetary Fund forecast to an 8% economic contraction in Spain and unemployment rates of 21%. This would meet the figures, the official figures that you are seeing below, provided by the government the last weekend, when they say, this is official figures provided by our government, that the Spanish, that our GDP would decline in 92% and an unemployment rate of 19%. Okay. Please, next slide. And what have been the financial measures introduced in Spain by the government? So, first, there was a financial support package and a stimulus package of more than 200 billion euros, which represents the 20% of the Spanish GDP. The question was on the streets and on the newspapers is, how is Spain going to fund these packets? Okay, and it was talking about, there was some gossips and some discussions of the Corona bonds, but there were some discrepancies between the different European Union countries, and well, we're still waiting for what will be the resolution of the suggestions in order to fund these financial packages. But there was another kind of support, which was provided particularly by the banks, and these are the loans for entrepreneurs, small and medium enterprises. These are bank loans conceded by the banks, but which are guaranteed by the Spanish authorities. And they must be dedicated to self-employed entrepreneurs, small business affected by the infection. And of course, there are additional measures in order to provide liquidity to the companies. But the real thing is that to date, not many of these affected people have received these measures to guarantee liquidity. These have been difficult in order to transfer the money or to transfer this liquidity from the government, from authorities to the affected people. Going to the private sector or to the private individuals, there was a mortgage moratorium too, which affects the moratorium, the payment of mortgages. Okay, but it was only considered for some people, some debtors who have been considered as economically vulnerable. And this concept is limited only to that people who have lost their job, who have lost well, 70% of the regular income they receive. So it's difficult to expand this measure to all the people here in Spain. There was another issue, which is a temporary employment suspension allowed. This means that some small businesses and small companies are allowed to not dismiss, but to suspend the contracts, and the government guarantees the liquidity of the employees by providing some subsidies. And an additional and important measure is the rental agreement reduction or measures. There was introduced a measure or a suggestion stating that there can be different solutions in order to adjust the effect of the COVID infection on the rental agreements. And first measure was the reduction or a deferral of the payments of the rentals. And afterward, there was approved a microloan scheme in order to provide liquidity to the tenants for being able to pay the monthly rentals, and of course, in order to not jeopardize the investments of the landlords. But there was a distinction, and it is referred to the type of landlord you have. And for example, I'm saying here that the small landlords will receive the rent of the properties unless other things agreed with the tenant. So there is a free right to agree between tenant and landlords, and if they agree to do anything different, they can respect their own agreements. But if not, they are the landlords, the small landlords, are entitled to receive the full amount of money. But on the other hand, we have the large owners, which have been considered those who have more than 10 properties rented. And in that situation, they may choose between reducing the rentals or restricting the payments for the next 3 years. Okay? And there was an additional measure introduced by the Spanish government, which is the possibility of redemption of the private pension plans. In Spain, it's not possible to take out the money from the pension schemes, for the private pension schemes, unless that you are retired or you have a disability, or there is an exceptional event, like for example, that you get on a final unemployment. But they have introduced a new possibility to take the money out, but it is only limited, of course, to these kind of people who are the economically vulnerable. And the amount of money you can take out from the pots are limited only to the amount of money that you have not earned during the period of the infection. So it is not a real solution for the real economy. Please go next slide. In which refers to the tax measures, well, I'm not going to highlight every point, but I just would like to highlight that there was a first package of tax measures introduced by the government, which did not imply the suspension of payment of taxes. It would only trigger the suspension of filing the returns. But of course, it did not help to the regular taxpayers or to the small business or entrepreneurs in order to stop the damage of the COVID on their accounts. So there was a lot of criticism here in Spain. There was a lot of critics from the public sectors, from the businessmen, from huge corporations, in order to help the small business, which here in Spain are really, really relevant. And well, as you can see there, you will have the presentation, but there was, the first package was only extensions of filling dates, expiry of terms, these kind of things. But it was only referred to the obligation of submitting the tax returns, not to the obligation of paying the taxes. Okay. Next slide, please. After that criticism, there was a second package of measures introduced by the government, by the central government, which was introduced on the 14th of April and 21st. And as I was saying there, the first package did not extend the deadlines for paying, okay? And the thing is that this new package introduced this possibility for the small businesses. There was an extension due to the extension of the state of alarm. There was an extension until 13th of May of all the previous reference made to 13th of April. And of course, which is more important, the second bullet there, an extension until 20 May too, of the filling and payment deadlines, okay? It was limited, as I was saying there, to particular parts of the taxpayers, which are those regulated by the volume of business not exceeding the 600,000 euros. And there was, well, different extensions to other obligations and to the possibility of communicating with the authorities throughout the expiry of train certificates. There was a new exemption, for example, for mortgages who are now being renegotiated due to the conditions of the COVID and these kind of things. I'm saying this below in the autonomous territories and local tax measures, that it's important, as I mentioned before, that in Spain, the autonomous territories and the regions and the local administrations are entitled to approve their own measures in certain situations on certain taxes. And the thing is that they take action to, they have taken the action before in which refers to tax amendments than the central states in the taxes that they are entitled to do that. Next slide, please. Now I would like to highlight which is the main consequence or the main consequences here in Spain of the COVID, which will be affecting, of course, the real estate markets and the potential tax measures in order to fund the packages, the financial packages that have been approved. The first one is the real estate markets. Well, of course, during the state of alarm and today, the market is frozen. There was a freezing of all the transactions due to the lockdown, despite the notaries are open, but only for really, really urgent transactions. There was an estimation of different professional associations and professional colleges that the Spanish market, the Spanish real estate market, will fall for 10% or more or less. So there is another curious thing, that is a new interest in countries and properties in order to have a good lockdown, different to the flats in the city centers. And the expert says that the market will be recovered in 2 years, for 2022. So we are seeing here a headline from the El País newspaper, where they say that house prices in parts of Spain have seen significant declines, although few sales are occurring. These few sales, of course, are being taking part in the main cities in Madrid, Barcelona, and really, really specific properties. This is not a general trend. And in which refers to the potential tax measures to be introduced, this is the huge effect that we're going to face here in Spain. The potential tax measures to get introduced, which will have an impact on every taxpayer here, and particularly too on those non-residents who has assets here. And it was said that some ministries here in Spain have published their opinions and their comments, stating that there will be a new Google tax, which is a 2% tax on the digital income obtained by tech multinationals here in Spain. There was an additional 0.2% financial transaction tax, which will be imposed on all the acquisitions of Spanish producers. And then there will be another type of measures to get introduced in the personal income tax and wealth tax affecting individuals, and of course on the corporations, which, well, in my opinion, will not be helping so much for the recovery of our economy. And as you can see there was a 4% additional tax envisaged for the individuals, whether for savings or for the general income, employment income. And there will be an increase too in the wealth tax. Spain is one of the, I guess, 3 countries in the world, in the developed world, who have wealth tax. And now it's envisaged a new increase. So Let's see what happened with the rich people living in Spain, because this can be really significant in order to fund the economic packages that the government is stating. And there will be an additional impact on corporate income tax, establishing a minimum tax payable of 15% and a 15% tax on dividend distributions made as per Parents Directive. And well, there will be another additional measures, but of course today they have not been released here. And we will look forward to receiving the news from the government and of course from the regional governments too, in order to assess the effects of the measures in the Spanish people. This next slide. Just for ending my presentation, I would like to introduce and highlight the comments here in this slide, because it's the average cost for a 30-year-old inheriting assets for the value of 800,000 euros in Spain. And as you can see, it depends on several factors, but the main factor determining the tax due here in Spain, inheritance tax due, is the autonomous territory, the region where the deceased was living. And you can see the differences, okay? You can see that there is a huge difference between some territories and another. And this will have an impact on all the COVID dead people, because, well, there was some suggestions from some political parties and political forces trying to establish a general exemption for those people inheriting assets by virtue of a death caused by the COVID. To date, there was no resolution, no comment from the government in this regard, and they are not envisaged to be done too. But this is just for you to be aware of the huge differences of being in one part of Spain or another when talking about taxes. Next slide, please. And well, I usually introduce this slide in my presentations because it's really illustrative for people living in Spain or trying to relocate here, because they are reflected which are the main assets of the families in Spain, the business assets, the real estate, the financial, other lucrative or leisure assets, like for example, the yachts. And I usually put these three colors, the green, yellow, red, in order to say or to highlight which are the assets which are tax benefited or which have a really tax effective tax treatment here in Spain, in order to make amendments in the tax planning or the wealth planning of the clients. And now, by virtue of the COVID, I think that the clients have a really good opportunity in order to review the tax planning, because I have lots of quotes from clients telling me, okay, now I've been aware that everything can change in a minute here, and what the month before was a normal situation means that today I cannot go to the street and I can die even in my home. So without nothing done, the taxes can be massive here in Spain. So this is just an encouragement for people to foster the wealth planning and to review it annually, because it's really important to do that. Okay, and that's all. Thank you.
Javier, thank you very much. Was really enlightening. Was really interesting.
Thank you.